Hello, and welcome to my Winter 2021 anime reviews. We have a lot to cover. This season was absolutely crazy. I ended up watching a ton of shows, way more than I expected to. If I'm on the ball, I'll have time-stamped the various shows in the description below, so you can skip to ones that you're interested in, or you can join me on this anime discussing marathon. So let's plunge right ahead with our traditional stuff I didn't watch. Always want to kind of talk about things I considered watching or watched a bit of but didn't make the cut for the whole season commitment. Horimiya, I watched the first episode of and I found it very entertaining. I knew the manga was quite well regarded and I had vaguely planned on reading it someday. And the anime was good too. Cloverworks did it. The animation was lots of fun, lots of very fun faces. But the pacing was insane, and I found out later that they were planning on covering the entire manga in just one season of anime, which, you know, that's their prerogative, and I guess that would probably make for a pretty compelling arc and a satisfying finale, but it was just too frantic for me. It seemed like they were trying to cram in too many plot points just so they can hit all of the major events of the manga, and with especially with kind of like a slice-of-life romancy sort of story. I really like to take my time with it. I really like lots of filler chapters that allow you to just get to know the characters and just sort of enjoy their company, so to speak. So I think I would rather just read the manga, and we'll probably do that at some point. Jakukara Tomozaki-kun, I was kind of interested in because I heard, especially in the original light novel, they make a ton of references to Super Smash Bros. Melee. Like even specific references to stuff like wave dashing and Fox being the strongest character and stuff like that. So I was like, you know, as a Melee fanatic, I was pretty intrigued by that. But I heard in the anime, it's a lot less like explicitly referencing Smash Bros, probably for like copyright reasons. And you know, that alone is not a very good reason to watch the show, just because it makes some references to a game I play. I heard overall it was kind of interesting though. It sort of reminds me of the one with Hachiman. I can't think of what it's called, where it's kind of like a more cynical and depressed MC who nevertheless finds himself in kind of a harem situation, and there's more of like maybe a philosophical drive to it. Hey, kitty. Where we're kind of looking at the human condition in maybe some depth, which always interests me, but it's... Hey, why not scratch the thing you're supposed to scratch? But I don't know. Maybe I'll watch it sometime. Wasn't enough to break into the tier of shows I was watching this season. And this show was nowhere near good enough to break into the tier of shows I would watch. I would say it's many tiers below that. We watched the first episode of it for a laugh in our anime watching club, and it was a laugh and a half indeed. Absolute train wreck of a show. Some of the worst animation I've ever seen. Gratuitous use of very amateurish CGI. Apparently this was a project made by people who had only worked in live action before, and this was their first foray into anime, and they just had no idea what they were doing and didn't hire anyone that knew what they were doing. The plot was absolutely absurd and ridiculous, but I was compelled. I actually said I would be down to watch this whole series with you guys. I think that would be a lot of fun. Watching it by myself, though, probably wasn't going to happen. But yeah, I've talked before about how I only end up watching shows I like. If I'm not really feeling it, I'll drop it. And so when we do these review videos, it's all just high scores and praise, and I think it would be interesting to kind of break down a show I didn't like and what I didn't like about it and why it didn't work. We've come kind of close with some stuff, like the second season of Kimono Friends. I was able to struggle through just out of a cultural responsibility or something. But this would be even more of a disaster than that, if you can believe it. So, I don't know, maybe someday, but it's not really worth my time to watch something like this by myself. Anyways, let's move on to the first show I did watch, Beastars Season 2! I got tricked again by the same show. When I first watched Beastars, I had some sense that it was kind of heavy, kind of dark. But I thought, I don't know, it's a show about talking animals. Shouldn't it still be kind of silly? Shouldn't it still have some goofiness around, well, you know, I'm a chicken. That's what I do. Bluck, 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 you know. And there was some of that, but oh my gosh, that show was an emotional grinding machine. It just... Hey, what are you doing up on the table? The cat's up on the table. Maybe he'll come and walk in front of the camera for a fun surprise. So I thought, though, at the end of Season 1, the final arc of Season 1 has, like, extremely high stakes. It's extremely action-packed. And I thought, okay, this is kind of the direction the show is going in. It's going to be these big showdowns, these feelings of big climaxes, and it's going to go to a huge scale. So I thought, you know, I had kind of mixed feelings about this because I really liked when the scale was kind of smaller, more intimate, just limited to the school. Really introspective, really about the individual personalities of the characters. So I almost had like this kind of feeling of reassuring skepticism where, because I thought, oh, you know, it's kind of blowing up into this thing a little bit beyond what I expected or hoped for, I don't really need to worry about being too emotionally devastated by it. I don't need to worry about being too saddened by it or anything like that, because now it's this kind of crazy action show. I was even naive to think I was really looking forward to watching the first episode because it was so well liked, it was so popular, it was kind of like a crossover hit, and I thought they're surely going to indulge in some silliness of, we're back, remember these characters, here's a goofy situation, here's maybe a whole episode or two that are just kind of lighthearted to resituate yourself back in the story. I was so wrong. Everything is still progressing in that expanding of scope, as I discussed before. It still feels like we're moving into bigger and more action-y territory, and yet it also feels smaller, more intimate. It feels like closer in introspectively to these characters, and it's even heavier. It's just heavier and heavier than ever before. The interaction between Legoshi as a microcosm of the society that has raised him, that he in turn defends and struggles against, we understand more and more just how complex the world that they've built is. And yet there is no reprieve in just kind of untangling intellectually how all of these plot points are connected, how this organization is influencing this organization, how societal traditions and mores have built up these cultural expectations over thousands of years. You can puzzle all of that stuff out, and it's fascinating. But while you're watching it, there is this primacy of emotion that you're not able to take refuge in just examining it intellectually. Instead, you're just caught up in the despair and the hope and the struggle and the fear of the characters. We journey deeper inward to the psyche of our cast. And only from there do we extract these connections to ideology, that we start to see them as significations of these forces in society. But because we're starting from the character, because we're starting from that point of empathy, it just hits so deep. There's dread, fear, paranoia of both the self and others. And near the end, even though I said I was so excited to watch the first episode of the show, by the end I was also watching it eagerly as soon as it came out, but it was more of a sense of duty. I felt a duty to see this show through. It was a very rare, very heavy feeling, but I was impressed. Hopefully they'll keep going. Hopefully they'll make season 3. I'd say this one was absolutely up to the standards of season 1 as well. Of course, there's things I liked about it more, things I liked about it less than season 1, but overall I gave it the same score. An 8.5, and I'm eagerly awaiting more. I really like how this is presented too. I think the animation style that Orange uses is really well suited, and just their cinematography, the split screens and stuff. So eventually I'd like to read the manga too, but while they're making new seasons, and I hope they'll continue making new seasons, I think I'm going to watch the anime. Next we have Non Biyori Nonstop. This is just more Non Biyori. Hooray! Everything I loved from this series, which has now been going on for quite a long time. There was 3 seasons, right? Or just 2? Regular and repeat? And then the movie. The movie was phenomenal too. If you haven't watched that, Non Biyori Vacation, should check it out. It's beautiful. And what are some of the things I loved about these series? Dwelling on the sensory bliss of deep, idyllic rural landscapes, small stories of friendship and fun, learning and growing, discovery and adventure. Delightfully structured episodes that have subtle little themes running through them, maybe some consistent kind of emotional point or lesson to be learned, but also twists that subvert our expectations of those themes, and some really hilarious running gags that they build up and establish and then really fruitfully utilize throughout all just one episode. But I, especially with this idea of the running gags and stuff, I'd kind of forgotten how funny the show was. That I look back at it and I think of really peaceful vistas and the characters just relaxing under sakura trees and stuff. But Non Biyori is hilarious. There's all these scenes that build up what I call the 3 C's method, and I'm thinking more and more that this is really what I love in a lot of comedy. First, there is a moment of humorous coincidence. Something happens unexpectedly, just because the fates align in that way. Some error is made, something is broken, something is found, some miscommunication occurs. Just a little twist of fate that kind of propels the whole situation. Then we have the cringe, where we can anticipate something terrible happening as a result of this. We can see where this misunderstanding is headed. We can see that the broken vase will be revealed. But the characters, or at least some subset of the characters, are frantically trying to fix it. They're struggling to right the train back on the rails and keep it going forward, where we all know that the train is doomed. And just the feeling of cringe and that anticipation is one of my all-time favorites in comedy, across all sorts of mediums. This is what I want from like cringe sitcoms too. Just that looming sense of catastrophe, and in the final phase, everything blows up. The worst case scenario occurs. And everyone, of course, delights in seeing our flustered characters. Feel both this weird, dreadful coincidence that you know where things will go. You know the outcome that is bound to happen, but you're even more sure that it'll end up even worse than you expected, that things will go even further. And then, on top of just rediscovering with delight how funny this series is, there's some stuff that they just have never done better. Some real core strengths of this series that they're still improving, that are still being perfected. Timeless visual poetry in some scenes. There's one in the first episode that just enraptured me. I'm not sure why. Renge is playing the recorder, and she's playing a very traditional Japanese folk song, the frog song, along with her friends who are playing on flutes. And when they play the part of the song that's supposed to represent the frog croaking, they cut. The camera just cuts to this picture of a frog sitting in the creek, croaking away. And it has this timelessness to it, that it's a way of depicting an image, a feeling, a connection that goes back for centuries to the invention of this folk song, that goes back even further to the emotional connections that even very ancient humans would have with the sound of frogs. It attempts to tap into something that is totally beyond the scope of this one series, of these one characters, of this one story, to just this visual poetry, this totally timeless, eternal, natural vision of the world. It's just beautiful, and there's lots of little examples like that throughout the series that you suddenly are in awe of the grand scope of human history. And the nostalgia in the series, such beautiful moments of time passing and recognizing the passage of time and looking back together. And I'd say this is just getting stronger and stronger naturally as the series progresses, because now, like, the first season of this came out in, what, like 2013 or something? It's been like 8 years, and if you've been reading the manga, it's been even longer. So not only are the characters nostalgic for moments in their lives, but now they can present things that we have seen many years ago in the same series with that same sense of nostalgia. That's one of the treasures of a series that runs for a very, very long time, or something that's very, very spread out over the years, that it can start building up this internal nostalgia that really hits deep if you've been watching it that whole time, if it's been special to you that whole time. And I was really glad that they're leaning into this, that they're embracing the longevity of the series. So this I would give, is Hotaru holding up her sweater, a 9, a very solid 9. The only things stopping it from scoring even higher are just, it's not, you know, amazing Sakuga. It has very pretty scenes, but the animation just is what it is. So yeah, a lovely show. Okay, next we have Jujutsu Kaisen. This was something that we're watching for DDR Club Anime. It's called DDR Club, but obviously we cannot meet up in person anymore to actually play DDR, so it is mostly just anime watching club now, which is still great. We figured we should get like an action show to kind of balance out our watching roster. And this was one a few people were interested in. And this is indeed a shonen action series for shonen because they love action. And it's kind of cool. It's been a very long time since I picked up just like a straightforward battle shonen series. I kind of forgot their strategies early on in serialization. They throw everything at the wall. You want a tournament arc? Yeah, we can do a tournament arc. Oh, you want something like really gritty, going through the underground of the city? Yeah, sure. Oh, you want like tragedy? We can do a real sad story. Like, look at this kid, guess what? He's gonna die. And just kind of seeing this experimentation is really kind of exciting, especially when it's not just in the manga, but it's something that has now been repackaged, been animated at a very, very high quality and extremely professional level. This is, in my mind, what I would call the modern generic shonen. It has all of the very generic shonen archetypes and plot structures. They have like a power system. They have hierarchies of power that, you know, sometimes are ambiguous, sometimes get subverted, which is exciting. As tradition, every time there's like kind of a major battle, we'll go into the backstories of each of the characters. They have the traditional shonen twists where fights go a different way than you would expect, or oh, it turns out that guy was evil, oh, it turns out that guy wants to kill that guy, blah, 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 blah. Nothing very exciting on this level. But now it's very modernized in a way that still feels like very safe and generic, if this makes sense. That, you know, since these original kind of archetypes of shonen were defined by like Fist of the North Star and Dragon Ball way back in the 90s and 80s, things have gone a lot further. There's been a lot of innovations, but now those innovations are being folded back into what is like the safe, generic, standard shonen series. So, you know, the shocking feeling that any character could die, the tension of losable fights, the idea that, oh, maybe the good guy society is actually maybe very flawed, or parts of it are flawed. You know, there's not a clear delineation between good guy and bad guy necessarily. Big tension moments that just suddenly break into very absurd comedy is something that I've noticed a whole lot of shonen series are kind of now relying on this trick as a way to kind of go like beyond tension in a certain way. And I love all of these things. Don't get me wrong. The fact that I'm pointing out, oh, this is kind of the new tradition, doesn't mean that it doesn't affect me. Doesn't mean that I'm not compelled by it and that I'm having fun. And it's done really, really well in this series. The animation is generally great. Studio Mappa stepping up. Fantastic studio, especially for these shonen action series. The fight scenes have absolutely fantastic Sakuga. Just really cool choreography, really intense, really tight. I don't know, there's probably, if you've watched this, fights coming to mind just as I say this, and it could be a totally different set of fights that come to mind when I think about it too. almost every episode has some awesome impacts and punches and stuff like that. And some of the comedic tangents, as I'm talking about like this absurdist comedy, are really hilarious. My favorite character was Toto, who's just this gigantic mass of muscles, and a lot of the huge tangents that character kind of takes us on I found absolutely hilarious and really endearing. But I wouldn't say the show was actually all that shocking. It was shocking in ways that are now predictable to me, I guess I would say. So, look forward to Chainsaw Man. Same studio, I hope the same level of effort, the same level of sakuga, but the actual plot content of that series is the next level. It's the subversion after the subversion, the postmodern shonen series. So I'm really excited about that. But this was nice too. I would give this is Toto-san, by the way, a solid 8. It's good. I had a lot of fun with it, but it wasn't anything super remarkable. It was fun to watch in a group too. Next we have Skinfinity, or SK8 the Infinity. I always like calling it Skinfinity because it's like SK infinite sign. So it looks like it just says Skinfinity. This is skateboarding. A show about skateboarding by Studio Bones. A consistently awesome studio. And the director was the person who made Free, the extremely gay, extremely beautiful KyoAni swimming series. This should be a slam dunk. But instead it's kind of more of like a layup. I used the sports analogy. Isn't that insane? Did I use the sports analogy? A layup, if you don't know, is where you just kind of walk up and throw the ball in the hoop from close up. And it's like really easy. Whereas a slam dunk, you gotta have like a lot of momentum. And you gotta be able to jump like really, really high. And you go like blam into the net. I'm pretty sure. I think this is how basketball works. Anyways, so yeah, I would say this is just kind of like a layup. The animation is really good. There's some really good Sakuga type moments. The sense of speed, I think, is really important in any like racing series. Just the feeling of like acceleration, of being able to convey like, oh, this is unprecedentedly fast, or oh, he used some technique to like really rocket himself forward. And that was done well, so that's very important. But the kind of craziness that I love from Bones at their best, like Mob Psycho, of course, is a extremely essential example of this, where they bust out the crayons and the pencils, and they just go into this insane mixed media frenzy. It's beautiful, it's overwhelming, it's just so creative, with this explosive sense of anything is possible. That wasn't really there. It was much more straightforward. It was just, you know, standard action sequences, but well done. The mechanics of skateboarding were explained a bit, especially earlier in the series. It's a lot about how skateboarding actually works and what kind of tricks you can do, and it's very like down to earth and reasonable. But then the other sequences where they're actually racing each other are totally fantastical and don't make any sense and throw the laws of physics out the window. And I like both of those things a lot. I think focusing in either direction would have been great. But it's kind of an awkward middle ground between this idea that it's like a show about skateboarding and just like a very general shonen battle show where they could use anything to fight. And it doesn't really matter too much that it's skateboarding in particular. It's just about like the interpersonal conflicts and the power rankings and, you know, strategies and stuff. So I kind of felt like there was a kind of a muddled objective here. Character's a lot of fun. I think there was a good balance of the really action-y racing scenes and then much more low-key characters just hanging out, getting to know one another, stuff like that. But sometimes the relationships got like really melodramatic. The mood kind of got too dampened. For a show that's so silly at other points, so over the top, it was just kind of hard to take it seriously, the drama between the characters. It felt like it just really dampened the mood of the series and dampened the pace of it, and I just kind of wanted more fun, more action, you know. I don't need to see people mope around. It doesn't necessarily add much to the series if it just kind of feels like it's in the way. And they weren't gay enough. This is a pretty gay series, but it's not gay enough. I thought, you know, the director of Free went quite far in Free. Maybe this time she'll go even further. Not far enough. Not far enough. So yeah, just a solid show. It's maybe just a bit unambitious. It could have been way crazier in so many different directions, but they played it kind of safe. There would have been a 10 though, if the main characters kissed at the end. They don't. Sorry, that's spoilers, I guess, but they don't. Boo! Boo! But it was fine. I'm still happy to give it an 8. Just a very solid show. A good time. Very pretty at times. I love this shot when they go to Okinawa as a little practice camp. Alright, next we have a very strange show, Otherside Picnic. I didn't expect to watch this when I first saw the preview for it and stuff. It didn't seem like it would be all that good. But two things convinced me. One was that I realized the title was a reference to a book called Roadside Picnic, which is a Russian science fiction novel, which I haven't read, but it was adapted into a movie by Tarkovsky called Stalker. You may have heard of Stalker. It eventually then inspired a series of pretty popular video games. But the Stalker movie is phenomenal. I absolutely adore it. Perhaps one of my favorite movies of all time. There's just something really special about it that's very hard to put into words. But I thought if this author was naming their series after Roadside Picnic, clearly something about that franchise has really resonated with them too. That it's very special to them too. And I was like, okay. And the other was on Twitter, I saw some excerpts from this interview with the light novel author about the subject of Yuri. And we'll look at some excerpts of this afterwards. But I was like, damn, this guy gets it. That was basically what I only thought. Oh, this guy really understands a perspective that I had on Yuri, especially when I was very depressed in reading Yuri. There was kind of a certain mentality I had about it that's articulated very, very well in this interview. And I was like, yet again, something very kind of niche, something not that approachable has really resonated with this person in a way that it had also resonated with me. So I was like, okay. These two things, more than enough for me to eagerly pick up this show. But I have pretty mixed feelings about it. Here's some stuff that did absolutely nothing for me. Pretty much all of the action scenes I thought were really boring and really pointless. They encounter some sort of monster. It's basically the same routine that they need to figure out how to make it tangible, and then they just shoot at it a bit. Sometimes they run away from it for a bit, but I never felt very scared, very caught up in the action. This is kind of where the production of it, it's kind of a low budget type show, really is exposed that they can really make these action scenes very compelling. And then there's a little arc where they meet a military unit that has been stranded in this other side, this mysterious kind of dimension that they go in and out of. And that stuff, I was just like, I was big snorers, because I don't care about military fetishism and stuff, especially not in the sort of context they were presenting. I like girls in Panzer, I guess, but yeah. And most of the mechanics of this, the lore, I found very confusing. It seemed like they just kept kind of changing the rules whenever they wanted to, I guess, surprise you. Oh, suddenly we're in the other side and we don't know why, even though before we had to like work really hard to get at it. Sometimes the other side could invade the real world. Sometimes they talked about liminal spaces between one side and the other. And I don't mind it being confusing. I don't mind it being complex and having all of these different aspects to it and stuff. But it made the stakes like really difficult to grasp. It was like very unclear when they were in danger, when it was like kind of normal. It just, I don't know. It was much more of a reaction than a whoa reaction, if you've heard me talk about this very important distinction before. So I felt like that was needlessly overcomplicated, and that it would be a lot cooler if it was just like a very binary, okay, now we're on the other side and this is how things are. There was some stuff that was just okay for me. I thought it was kind of neat that a lot of the episode plots were based off Japanese urban legend. Especially the feeling that everything was like very close to you, that like suddenly these sort of mysterious events could be happening in your backyard. And the attempt to kind of tie them all together, that all of these are phenomena of the other side interfering with the real world, was kind of cool. It just kind of gave it a neat, relatable sense. And I just like hearing about urban legends and that kind of modern lore is kind of interesting to me. But again, all of these, almost all of them, they have the urban legend, you learn about it, but at the end it's just some other monster that they're gonna shoot at with their guns. Like, consequentially, this backstory very rarely ends up mattering. Some of the animation was kind of nice, especially the more comedic character acting, I thought was kind of fun. They made the characters really expressive, they reflected their personality really well through that expressiveness. But most of the animation was quite mediocre. But some stuff really did hit, and it was kind of disappointing because I felt like if they just had focused on the stuff that really did it for me, this could have been like a phenomenal show. And I think it also would have been a show that isn't really marketable to anyone. So I can understand why this isn't just like Stalker the anime, even though that's what I really wanted. So the parts that reminded me of Stalker, when they're in the other side, there's just this feeling of stillness, of vastness, of a totally invisible, totally mysterious, but ever-present danger. I don't know, just something about that. It's just so romantic. You know, with big R romance. We'll talk about small R romance in a second. I don't know, just this feeling of being totally free, totally infinitely far away from the world you knew before, all of your responsibilities before, and yet totally powerless, so tiny compared to what you've entered into instead. And just really beautiful shots of the other side, of the zone equivalent. It did remind me of Stalker in a very good way. The sense of Yuri wasn't quite what I hoped based on reading that interview. I thought that would be even more of a focus. I'm not really sure how they would have done that, as you'll see when we discuss exactly what this type of Yuri is, the unfilmable, unobservable Yuri. I thought they would really lean more into that. I thought it would be a lot more explicitly romantic between the main characters, based on these comments. And basically looking for a feeling of like a Yuri of abandonment, a Yuri that kind of transcends societal bounds, that the characters, through their love for one another, leave behind the trappings of their day-to-day life and transcend into something that was previously unimaginable. This felt like the perfect story for something like that. That's something I've really cherished in Yuri. Especially considering how that interacts with like the role of observer, that you as the observer are getting left behind to some extent. Anyways, I don't know. It's a very big subject. It kind of has to do with the self-excluding paradise and other such big, hard to articulate terms. But it was still good. Like, there was still hints of that. I could tell how the author was trying to express that in his own way. And I feel like maybe just anime isn't really the medium for it, that the requisite pacing of having like a monster every episode really detracted from being able to build up that atmosphere. But it was still fine. And when I kind of got a glimpse of it, I was like, yeah, that's what I want. It really feels like this and Tatsuki, who made Kimono Friends and Kamerikusa, are closing in on something really, really special. That there's an idea just outside the borders of their imagination that would be something with the potential to just be like, that would stick with me forever. But they need to ditch the action scenes. They just have to have the guts to make one of these stories where the characters don't have to fight a monster every friggin' week. It's so tedious, and I don't understand what it's supposed to add. Anyways, I would give this series a... Oh, yeah. First we'll talk about a concept of Yuri of absence is beginning to form. This is... they were talking about the idea of inanimate objects having Yuri, stories of inanimate objects that can't actually interact and don't have consciousness, but viewing them in a relationship, and how this is kind of more of a BL thing, whereas Yuri seems to be thinking about the Yuri of absence. An emotional scenery is already Yuri. Cliff is towering over the sea, grass is growing atop of it, there is a fence, the gray ocean and the sky are stretching beyond the horizon, there is an empty beach for two. Someone was uploading these images with a Yuri tag. You can totally get that. And I do. I totally get that. I often thought of Yuri as like, oh, Yuri is just like a mountain. Yuri is a mountain with like a small meadow growing on it, and there's a flower growing on it. But that's on the other side of the mountain. It's you see a totally barren, rocky mountain face, but you know on the other side a flower is blooming. I often wrote a lot about Yuri in these terms, and I was like, this guy gets it! This guy gets it! So they referenced the cover of Chapter 9 of Otherside Picnic. They're riding on a farming vehicle, the boundless meadow is around them, you're saying this is Yuri. I didn't include the section immediately after that, but they talk about how you could even get rid of the girls, you could even get rid of the farming equipment. It's just the idea that these spaces exist for hypothetical Yuri couples is enough to convey a sensation of Yuri. I sound like an insane person, and I'm sorry. This is maybe a little more clear. There's this idea, I want to become a wall, I want to become a decorative plant. You do see a lot of Yuri fans expressing this, that they want to be a inanimate observer of a Yuri relationship. But here the author says, that's unnecessary. I'm unnecessary. I don't even want to become an observer. I don't want to just be a human-shaped wall, a wall-shaped human. I don't want to become a wall at all. A barely acceptable idea would be something like what mangaka Tatsuya Ima-san tweeted when Kimono Friends was airing. I want to become human remains lying around somewhere in the far corner of Japari Park. That's the absolute maximum I could accept. And they talk about this corpse. I prefer if it was more weathered. Hey man, it's your book. You could have made it more weathered, but whatever. At most, bleached bones scattered around. I don't need consciousness. I wouldn't want to affect anything with my observation. I want to write unobservable Yuri. I want to become nothing. Now, I speak to this as kind of like a cultural phenomenon that I now feel quite distant to. It was much more when I was like very depressed and reading tons and tons and tons of Yuri manga that I would feel things like this. I would really strongly feel things like this. So it's a little difficult for me now to read these things and to be like, I was saying almost these exact same things a few years ago, but now I feel radically different. I wonder why. And now to look at the work of someone who thinks like that and try to like kind of empathize again, to tap back into that place in my mind and connect these things. And I think on a certain part, it was a failure on my part to really re-immerse myself in that same mentality. But it is a part of my brain that still exists. It is still things I once thought and felt and wrote down. I can look back at my writing and remember that. So yeah, I don't know. The show that brought up a lot of emotions. Just even looking at this fills my heart with some kind of feeling that I cannot describe. But ultimately, I would only give it a 7.5. It was fine. It was good. But it was disappointing in some ways. Okay. Moving along to saner topics, hopefully. We are going to... No, we're not. Moving on to even more insane topics. We're going to talk about Wonder Egg. So I have a lot to say about this show. If you look at the timestamps below, you're going to see there's a big Wonder Egg chunk. First, I'm going to talk about whether or not I would recommend it with absolutely no spoilers. Because I think this is a series that if you want to watch it, if you're planning on watching it, you should know as little about it as possible. I think that really adds to the experience. So without any spoilers, I have a lot to say about this one. My spoiler-free recommendation. The show is an absolute masterpiece of production. It is just God mode across the board. The character designs, the characterization, the backgrounds, the setting, the atmosphere, the sound design, the OST provided by DD Mouse, a musician I've been a big fan of for a long time, who is used absolutely excellently here. The voice acting is impeccable. The animation, the sakuga, and in almost every episode there was scenes that just made my jaw drop with the quality of animation, both in thrilling fight scenes and the more subtle character acting. Only at the end it does fray a little bit, but my friend was working on this show. My friend did animation for this show, and he said it was just the worst death march he had ever experienced. That they were, one of the producers was hospitalized. They had to delay a week. This was, and a nightmare production because their ambition was so high. The quality they had set for themselves in the first episodes was so high that they felt they had to match it. I could go on and on. I heard a lot of stories from my friend. I don't know if I'm violating his NDA to repeat them. You get what I'm trying to say. So near the end, there's a few scenes that you can feel like, oh, they're kind of doing this for the budget. But almost that has like a nostalgic feeling to me. It reminds me of Evangelion, where near the end you felt like the whole production was like falling forward, carrying that torch, trying to get to the end. That even that really reflected just the insane passion behind this show. Truly insane passion behind this show. So that I couldn't even really complain about that. All of this is executed brilliantly with tireless passion in service of an incredibly unique and ambitious idea, a brand new testament to what anime can be. It is cute but cruel, girly but edgy. It's the quadfecta. This is like a meme among my friends. Cute but cool, girly but edgy. It's like the pinnacle of aesthetics. Anyways, yeah, in terms of production, in terms of how ambitious this series was and how well it was realized, it is unqualified just a masterpiece. But the idea that they chose to execute can easily be very, very triggering, and it certainly isn't flawless in how they chose to execute it. So, if you're concerned at all about that, if there's certain things that you're kind of sensitive to, either because you kind of have some trauma around it and it's very unpleasant for those things to come up again, or because you have a very strong moral stance on it and you don't like seeing it depicted in certain ways that offend you, this show could easily, very, very easily bring up those things for you in a way that could be very, very unpleasant. So now we are going to have a little but perhaps necessary spoiler discussion. Pretty much every trigger warning in existence applies for this show, and I'll list them out briefly here without as little context as possible to prevent spoilers, but enough that if you know something about this is going to be really upsetting to you, you can act appropriately. Grooming, sort of, domestic abuse, physical abuse, abuse of authority, pregnancy, rape, strange families, bad parents, bullying, isolation, agoraphobia, love issues, sex issues, body issues, gender issues, dysphoria of all kinds, cults, idolatry, experimentation with self-harm, and flatlining, deliberately bringing yourself to the brink of death, violence, gore, truly revolting acts, and their gut-wrenching consequences. You are not spared. Anything in the series, when something bad happens, you will see that trauma and that suffering play out in just the most excruciating detail. And suicide, lots and lots and lots of suicide. Suicide is really just the primary topic of the entire show. These issues are tackled sympathetically, but I would say sometimes quite shallowly. That it's just kind of a very quick, very stereotypical portrayal of what this does in the real world, how it manifests in the real world. Again, sympathetically, trying to show the tragedy of these things in a sympathetic light, but in a way that could feel very superficial, that if you personally had suffered through some of these things, you might see this sort of brisk overview as somewhat trivializing. And it's always contextualized by a structure where these issues aren't generally the focus as the complexities of that unique issue itself, but rather as a motivator for the action of the plot, something that is solved through the transcendent forces of the series. So, what I mean by that, as spoiler-free as possible, let's say we have an episode about someone who joins a cult. Instead of it really digging into the psyche of why someone would join a cult and the structure of the episode kind of orienting itself around the unique complexities of people who are vulnerable to cults and how cults manipulate you and all of that, instead it's just kind of like, okay, this is the bad thing, this very generic black boxed bad thing that happened to the character, and now we are going to have a fight scene to kind of deal with it. It's a little more complicated than that. Of course, like the lore of the series is much more mechanically complicated than that. But that's kind of the idea. It's not that it's resolved through the issue, but through this transcendent force of the mechanics of the series. And as a result, it's not just that if you're sensitive to this context, there's this idea that these are topics that should be like respected, that shouldn't just be kind of used as a plot point, but for the dignity of the people who have been victimized by these things in real life need to be given like a thorough, realistic examination instead of just kind of slotting it into like a fantastical use. And I think that could be kind of offensive to people, even if it's not like triggering for you, even if it's not like a trauma thing. I think people are totally right in seeing this show as being insensitive or offensive in another way. So I say all that just because these, I think, are very legitimate things to make you want to skip this show, and that you should have no problem at all skipping the show, even though it is, as I said, such an amazing, beautiful, mind-blowingly well-made show. I don't think that means you should subject yourself to it if these things bother you. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say without spoilers. Oops, I think there was... But yeah, we're going to get more into what I mean by this. In the spoiler zone, what I actually have beef with myself, that I find kind of offensive myself, and other things that I think would be offensive to other people. But yeah, this is kind of just what I wanted to say to set people up with kind of how the show functions. Okay, that's all I'll say without spoilers. Now, from this point on, warning, egg spoilers. Spoil egg. Do not watch if you want to watch egg and you want surprise. And I think if you still feel like you really want to watch it after all of that, then just skip ahead to the next show and plunge in and let me know what you think, because it's something. Okay. All right, let's get into the meat of this then. So what I really wanted from Wonder Egg after seeing the first episode was things to remain really dreamy, really surreal, and to get even stranger. I didn't want anything to be concretely explained, at least in terms of the dream world. If they eventually explain just what the characters' deals are in real life, that would be okay. But I wanted the other world where they're going and rescuing the egg girls and stuff, or fighting for them at least, to just get weirder and weirder and weirder, and for it to never be explained why that was happening. I wanted each egg girl adventure to have roughly the same scope, and focus more on the characterization of each girl rather than the backstory. And if you've watched the show, and if you're watching this section, you know that's like the exact opposite of what they did. Every girl was very much defined by, oh, I lived this archetypal life and then I killed myself because of this reason. Rather than it being, you could have like 8 stories of being bullied. That would have been fine. You could have 8 stories of severe depression. That would have been fine. Because all of those are actually very unique. This is the lesson that we should learn about suicide, is that every suicide is indeed very unique. And it comes down to the very individual circumstances of each person. It didn't need to be this buffet. I can understand why they did it, of course, for variety, to have a wide variety of aesthetics and plots and wonder killers and stuff, but it was kind of disappointing in that regard. I wanted the backstory with the teacher to get like really sinister, but only obliquely. We'll talk about this more later, but I thought that was like an avenue to something that would be like really haunting, really disturbing, the way that it was brought up in the first episode with just those tiny little like 2-second shots of her friend that killed herself and the teacher together and stuff. Like I saw great potential there. To keep up the same escalation of shock, I don't know how the hell they would do this, but in the first episode where she starts bleeding from her liver at the kitchen table and passes out, that was so shocking. That was so like mind-opening about just how far the show could go. I thought they should keep up that pace. Not really. I thought they should really do their best to iconify this strange visual language of like the akas, the cicadas, the eggs, in a way that I think Madoka is a fantastic example. That Madoka introduces things like Kyubey, the transformation egg for the magical girl, the writing of the witches' names and the way the witches' familiars and stuff work. They iconified it. They used it again and again in different circumstances. They wove it into the backgrounds. They wove it into every aspect of the atmosphere. And I felt the same potential when I saw things like the egg and the egg machine. When I saw the akas, I was like, oh, this is like a whole visual language they can build up. But kind of went in the opposite direction. To maintain a subtle but deepening tone of alienation and dread. This one speaks for itself. Who doesn't love that? And for the plot to aim and very, very open, with no clear resolution, no clear explanation. Just maybe a small implication that it was all just dreams within dreams within dreams, or that I had already died and this was just kind of her post-life vision or something. And maybe the show would have been hard to market to anyone. I don't know. It's not that different than Madoka. I think the way they ended up constructing it from episode 1 onwards really reflects aiming for a more mainstream audience, which is disappointing and I think led to a lot of the problems with it. But we will plunge ahead. So here's some stuff I liked. I liked the deeper characterization of the girls, even though some of the directions that this characterization went were kind of disappointing. Especially I ending up having a crush on Sensei, I thought was just kind of came out of nowhere, and that we were like very deliberately misled about what the situation was like. A truly baffling choice. I'm not really sure what purpose it served for the plot other than really undermining a lot of the other themes and a lot of the other kind of tonal, emotional moods that they'd built up. It really undermined those, and I don't think it had really any payoff. But I like that they got into the lives of the girls and how their personalities interact. And it was nice on a storytelling level, and then it was also just very nice on a level of that it made me happy to see these characters become happy and to get along and to learn about each other. That's one of the great joys, I think, of really character-focused storytelling. Something that I really like in anime in general is just that this happiness that you can share with the characters as they grow together. Yeah, I really like seeing them become friends and enjoy each other's company. That made me happy. And I wanted that happiness ripped away from me. That was my dream. They'd start dying or something, and then I would be terribly, terribly sad. I thought that would be kick-ass. And I think this was really well done, that even during their girls' days, even when they were having fun together and stuff, it didn't drift too far from the tone of the rest of the series. There was still this feeling of intensity, that they were doing this extremely dangerous thing together, that they were still longing for each of them, that none of them was super content or happy. I was impressed with that. That was like a very fine needle to thread, and I think they pulled that off. Right from the start, I remember watching it with a friend, and she was like, they're going to do a really stupid one. Once we kind of understood that it would be this collage of suicide, that every episode would have someone who had killed themselves for a different reason. It does seem pretty miraculous that they didn't have anyone that was like extremely stupid. They all felt plausible. They all reflected things that do happen in real life. As I said, they look at them kind of superficially. It's much more of like a structural element and something where we really dive into the psychology of it. But I was impressed that none of them were stupid. None of them were that stupid. There was none that I was super blown away by the backstory of the character, where I really felt they had tapped into something that spoke uniquely about the human condition. Again, it was kind of shallow. But they all felt real enough. They were all things that happened in real life, and they didn't make it stupid. I guess that's all I can say. They went about it in a way that wasn't stupid. It just wasn't fantastic either, I guess. So I think that a longer run really would have benefited. because with each of the egg girls, like there was the plot outside of the egg adventure, which of course is kind of the most substantial part of the show, and then there's glimpses of the egg adventure, sometimes multiple characters having egg girl rescue adventures in one episode, and then within that there was maybe, you know, a minute at most to look at the actual egg girl and her backstory and why she killed herself and stuff. And usually it's just like 1 or 2 scenes of shock. Oh, no way, they couldn't have done that to her. And it's like, it's not very humanizing. It reduces them to just like the most tragic elements. And, you know, there were things beyond that, like, and I think that really strengthened the show to have a little more personality shown in scenes beyond that. But they just really didn't have much time. I think if they were able to really go extensively into those characters' backstories, a model that would be good, I think, is to start the episode with just scenes from the character who will become the egg girl's life, and that feeling of dread you would get knowing, oh, this is building to her suicide, I think would be really powerful. And then encountering them later and knowing, like, to understand what happened in, like, that gap could have been cool. But anyways, I was very impressed with how often I was crushed by the series. Just twists and turns and revelations all had a nice brutal crushing feeling, which is what I wanted, and I was quite impressed by that. Even plot points that I didn't really like, that I thought were kind of stupid twists, still had like a really deep brutality in them that impressed me. And it reminded me of the Doujin artist TK. Do not look this up if you want to have a good time. One of the most brutally depressing storytellers in any medium that I know of. That his work just leaves you with this completely hollow feeling where you just are dead to the world. And a lot of plot points in this series gave me that same feeling. I was like, wow, you're really aiming for TK level. Good job. Okay. Things I didn't like. So early on, you start to realize that Ai's compatriot, Rika. Wait, no, Rika is the pop idol girl. It's like Naria. Geez, I can't remember their names now. Momo, Rika, Ai, and Naria? Anyways, you know the girl I mean. That she was the head of this Mensa-esque society. She was this, like, miracle genius girl. It's like, I don't like this. This smells bad. The division between this idea of, like, a very surreal dream world where we don't understand anything, and a very crushingly familiar real world where characters are dealing with all too real problems, got very blurred because now it was just the line between 2 unrelatable fantasy worlds. One where they fight things and one that is somewhat like Earth but contains things that are impossible and not happening in Earth. Like that to me was the first storytelling direction that I was just like, why? They seem to really deliberately play with like misleading tone. The whole plot with Sensei, they tricked us. I can't imagine how this wasn't deliberately a trick. And I think Rika at some point even mentions explicitly, like, oh, he was molesting that girl that killed herself, and now he's trying to shut Ai up so that Ai doesn't tell people about the relationship. And I was like, okay, that could be an interesting direction, you know? I thought having that as, like, one of the main real-world type plot points and that being, like, a big motivator of Ai's torment and stuff could be very compelling. But I was so, like, just this weird sense of disappointment, this weird sense of missed potential, and being, like, I really feel, like, deliberately misled to think it was going to be like that. And I don't know if it was supposed to be a thing of like, oh no, it's like much more wholesome than I realized. Oh, he really was like a good guy after all. And I just got creepy vibes for no reason. I don't know if that was supposed to be like a positive thing, as like a tonal counterbalance to the series, but it's not at all how it came across to me. Instead, I was just like, oh, that's it, huh? Yeah, not in any kind of fun way where my mind is being warped by the complexities of being let down by the character or whatever. Like, oh, this is much sadder than I realized. That would be fun. But no, just in a, it's like, oh, okay, that's really it, huh? Um, there's the episode where they took the Neria's friend off life. I'm gonna look up her name because it's gonna bug me. What's her name? Neru. Neru. They take Neru's friend off life support. I thought that was really cool. And I thought the idea that, again, having accepted that there's this weird Mensa-esque secret society bullshit, I was like, okay, this is an interesting direction to take that plot point. But again, when we started talking to the characters, talking about the flatlining experimentation stuff, it blurred another very necessary distinction, where instead of the phenomena that operates as the mechanics of the series, that a girl can die by suicide, she appears in the egg, we don't really know why or whatever, that's just how it works. Now it's something that's like interactable. There's like some sort of scientific principle behind it that the characters are seeking to examine and to maybe exploit by pushing the limits of, does this count as suicide? Will I appear in the egg if I go this far and make myself comatose but not dead? Blah, blah, blah. And that in itself kind of sounds cool. The idea of like, oh, this thing that seems like a supernatural transcendent force is actually, we can wrestle it down with science and manipulate it and maybe like rebel against the entire system in some cool way. That does seem cool. It seems like a really cool way to like escalate the plot. But it gave me this awful sense, like, oh no, this is going to be disappointing in the end. They're going to explain stuff and it's going to be stupid. And I was 100% right. My disappointment, my dread that I would be disappointed was 100% accurate. So here's some stuff I really, really didn't like. They didn't escalate things properly at all, I thought. They escalated primarily through character achievement and action, not through morality and existentialism. So, what I mean by this is all the girls are just like, yay, we're friends now, we help each other with our problems, this is like unilaterally good, we're like moving forward, we're accomplishing our goals by rescuing egg girls. And then later, they suddenly have the perfect enemy dropped in front of them. Dot/hyphen does irredeemable, despicable acts. Oh, I'm gonna get them. This is the primary escalation of the series. They get better and better at fighting. The danger escalates, but so does their power. And then yeah. So what I would want is look at like Evangelion or Madoka. The big action payoff and the feeling of personal triumph, if they happen, is incidental to a tonal development of the series, where the conventions of the structure start failing away. That by the end of Evangelion, I guess this is sort of spoilers, but these shows are super old. Why are we fighting the angels in the first place? Why are we fighting the witches in the first place? So much has happened. I am so adrift that these things have no meaning for me anymore. Instead here, the structure of helping the egg girls just becomes more and more and more important. They fall even more and more in line into the structure and the sequence. The fights just get more intense. There's no real sense of personal revelation of the characters. They just kind of have problems, but then because they can fight, the problems like kind of get solved, but not really. In the end, the parallel universe I says that she regrets it and that she misses her mom because she learned that the I in the other parallel universe had friends. Maybe that's like not related. But then what about all the other egg girls? Are we to believe that they all also regretted it after they saw their trauma beaten? It's just like a very complex situation that ultimately gets reduced to the most basic of shonen resolutions of we beat the bad guy. It's all the sci-fi stuff was super jank and it seemed really rushed that they suddenly had to cram in all this exposition that wasn't very much hinted at. There's a few hints, but that they suddenly just had an entire episode's worth of exposition they had to dump on us. I felt both over-explained in that I didn't want any of this explained and that I knew it was going to be stupid, but then also very under-explained in that there's a lot of weird plot holes and a lot of things that didn't really go anywhere and a lot of things that don't really line up with at all the logic of the Mensa-esque organization. Just the things that the Akkas were doing made no sense, and it felt like there was some big character motivation stuff that just wasn't explained. But they didn't have time. Why did they do it at all? I don't know. The more you try to explain, the more this beautiful dreamlike quality is removed, and then the more it just becomes baffling that it's like, oh, this was like a major scientific project to try to save lives, and your plan was to make girls hallucinate a talking cicada. Like it undermines the emotional quality it had before. The evocative dreamlike quality cheapens it. You look back at it and you're like, well, this dumb then. You can't have both. You can't have this sci-fi scheming where things are explained logically as the logical actions of characters trying to achieve a goal, and also have a world that operates based on this surreal symbolicness where you think about the form of the cicada husk and you think about why is it an egg? Because there's no artistic reason for why it's an egg. There's a plot reason, presumably, for why it's an egg, because the Akkas built a system where the girls come out of eggs. It can't be both. They undercut one another, and they should have just done the latter. It would have been 1,000 times more interesting. Okay, here's stuff I didn't like so much that it opens up big questions about how I view media as a whole. So the idea, this is like one of the big twists at the end, that we finally find out that these girls committing suicide, it wasn't just because of their material circumstances. There was also Frill, an AI built by the Akkas that they later destroyed, or Ura Akka alone destroyed, and then put into this, or wait, was it Akka or Ura Akka that destroyed? I don't know. Put her into this like bizarre coffin thing, and then Frill was still able to psychically infiltrate girls' heads and make them tempted by death, such that before they would have just had these miserable lives and kept living, I guess, but now commit suicide. I really cannot overstate how stupid I think that twist is. I cannot overstate it, but I'm going to do my damned best to state it sufficiently. The backstory of Frill I thought was kind of neat, kind of stupid. Some of the plot points I was like, really? Like, this is the best you could come up with? That they're in love with the same woman or something? Really, really well presented, though. That episode was phenomenal in terms of direction. I remember talking to my friend that worked on it about like parallel shots they did. Just like really cool framing choices that reflect a lot of the characters' emotions just in terms of like camera position and how the characters are staged. Like Hitchcock type stuff that's just like super cool. But everything we learned in that episode, I was just like, why? Why is it this? What in the fuck? Why did they pull the rug out from underneath and we land in stupid zone? And alright, sure, the comatose flatliner girl was like, on the fourth layer of Thanos, there was a sweet smell detected. And, oh, I understand now. The temptation of death. That by dipping down in comatose, she was able to understand the influence of thriller, stupid something. And at the time, I was like, I hope this girl is just crazy and nothing of consequence comes of this. But no, it was so much worse. And it's not just stupid, it's bad. I think this is like an evil message for a series about suicide to have. That these girls that committed suicide did it because an evil robot ghost AI told them to. I think is like a bad, unempathetic, bad message to have your series espouse. That okay, we'll get into it more. Say it. No, it wasn't their conditions in life. It's that robot ghost what made them did it. That's bad. And this goes double when you realize that it suggests reciprocally that all you need to do to beat up the right person with the right magical giant weapon and everything's Gucci, that if it wasn't for Frill, if we could somehow deactivate Frill, if we beat up Dot and Hyphen maybe, then everything would be fine. There would be no more temptation of death. There wouldn't be this rash of suicides among young women. What? What the fuck kind of message is that? It goes triple. This one I was like floored that they would suggest something like this. That in the last episode, the Wonder Killer was Sensei. And she was like, what? Why is it Sensei? Sensei was always so nice to us. And like, oh, the Wonder Killer is maybe an exaggeration of how the character felt. Maybe the Wonder Killer, we already knew was like a visualization of how they saw that evil in their lives. That abuser or that whatever. And to say, oh, well, you know, that was just how they saw them. The abuser in real life, maybe they weren't so bad. It's just awful. It's just an awful perspective to encourage people to take. And I know it's a fantasy series, and I know you're not supposed to go, oh, no one is going, well, I'm sure the real life suicides are caused by Frill. But it undermines the potential for empathy so greatly. We'll get into this more. This is a dangerous and distorted perspective that completely undermines the empathetic potential of the show on a fundamental ideological level. I cannot overstate my disappointment. So, what is the responsibility of morality in media? I had a slide called this exact same thing a year ago. 2 years ago, I'm sorry. 2 years ago, we talked about this exact same thing with Wataten. We talked about it with Wataten. And if you want to see that, it's an hour-long video. This one is even longer, so it looks like you're down to waste some time. Check out Winter 2019 anime reviews on this channel. And you'll see me go on for about an hour about morality in media and how that relates to Wataten. Once again, we are dealing with a show for otaku degenerates that espouses some very questionable takes, while also being such a realized masterpiece of production that you cannot look away. I would not be doing this if Wonder Egg Priority was a shitty show, if it was just a write-off show with nothing interesting about it, nothing amazing in its production. If it was just something knocked out by some no-name studio, of course we would not be talking about it at this length. There probably are shows. I'm sure there are shows, a dozen a season, that have even more questionable moral takes than this. But it's just because this one was so good in so many other ways and seemed like it was going for something that I could have found very agreeable until it... that I feel compelled to talk about it and to obsess over it to this extent. Okay, so if you recall, and if not, you could go back and watch it, but I'll summarize it here. That a way to think about the moral messages of a series and how it actually kind of tries to make a statement about the human condition in the real world is to strip away the fantasy elements. And examples I gave were the canonical one is like, look at Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. Imagine that the psychotic demon-possessed birds don't attack, and it's just this character drama of people trying to get together, this woman and her new partner and his mother. What messages is it saying about humanity? What messages is it saying about the human condition if you remove this part that could never happen? Another example I gave that I think is a good one is Attack on Titan. Take away the Titans. Take away all of that stuff. Just make it set in the real world and real Earth, but still have the same characters that have the same types of convictions, the same relationships, the same personalities. What is it saying now? I think this is a good way to arrive at the real heart of morality that every series has, but is sometimes difficult to perceive with all of the things piled on. Okay. So in Wataten, I talked about how the fantasy element was moe, of this kind of magical, emotional state of moe, where we can kind of engage with it because it's not real, where our line of consideration is based around the fact that it's not real. Here I would not say the moe is the element we need to strip away to see the morality. Same with the surreal elements, but it's the sci-fi explanations. It's the sci-fi plot that kind of is the hidden backbone of all of this. It's when we remove that we have to kind of look at what is the series still saying. Okay. All right. So this, yeah. So what I mean by this is kind of hard to explain. If you're telling a story about dreams, if you're telling a dream-like surreal story, the fantastical elements aren't that surreal dream-like stuff because that could exist in real life. Like, it would exist as a surreal thing in real life, if that makes sense. Okay. Like, literally a story about dreams, it's easy to imagine that you could have had those dreams in real life. And so to arrive at a connection between that story and the human condition doesn't necessarily mean discarding those dreams as a plot element. And then, of course, looking at the real life incidents of the egg girls, I don't think that is the surreal element that we, or the unreal, the fantasy element that we need to strip away to look at kind of the moral core of the series. Those are all brutally unfantastical. Those are all very cliche, plausible stories. And what actually signifies a departure from reality is that we look at these very plausible stories where girls could easily arrive at the decision to kill themselves and say instead that it was the robot ghost what made them did it. Okay, so now we kind of have established Wataten and Wonder Egg are both series that have maybe some questionable viewpoints, and we can kind of examine those questionable viewpoints by stripping away a fantastical element that sort of distorts how we as the viewer see it, so that we're arriving, instead of at a supernatural fantastical show, just a depiction of reality. Okay? Are we on board? I don't know if this is making much sense, but I feel very passionate about it, so I'm going to do my best to convey my thoughts here. So now let's compare the two, now that we have them kind of in the same arrangement. So my hope for Wonder Egg is that it would be a series that could empathetically bridge the myriad tragedies of suicide. And it would be like this magical girl sort of show where I and Al hear out and redeem the suffering of those lost to suicide. It's a pretty ambitious goal, to be sure. Kind of Madoka. Madoka, it's not suicides, but the girls, you know, spoiler alert, I guess. Madoka is 10 years old now, but the girls turn into witches. You could say that the circumstances of their lives drove them to become magical girls because their lives were so bad. They needed that one wish to turn them around, and it didn't matter the sort of sacrifice and danger they put themselves in. And then, of course, we find out they were doomed from the start. So it's kind of like a prolonged, unintentional suicide that is redeemed by Madoka. And I thought, you know, that kind of thing. But, and this is an insane thing to say, this structure, if they had made it like this, it would actually kind of be like Wataten. So what do I mean by that? It's something that meets people who are struggling and says, here is a fantasy to comfort you. We both know that it is a fantasy and that believing it is real is unhealthy, but just for a bit you can embrace this delusion. I think that would be, that's kind of the message of Madoka. Madoka, I would say a message is kind of like, if you sacrifice yourself, if you're pushed to this extreme where your viewpoints become this like twisted, self-destructive parody of themselves, you become this horrific witch, in real life, you can see this as just becoming something who you would have loathed to be, something that you're ashamed to be, that there is redemption for you, that through great sacrifice of someone else, there is this transcendental redemption for you. It is a fantasy of that. I'm sorry to alarm those in the Church of Madoka, but Madoka is not real. Madoka is not actually traveling through time, saving magical girls from turning into witches, but it presents an extremely compelling fantasy that you can easily meld your own life into. And I thought Wonder Egg was aiming to be like that, to say, oh, you're struggling with the idea of killing yourself. You feel like life is totally hopeless. Just know that if that happens, or even perhaps more, you have someone in your life who's killed themselves. You have someone close to you that's killed themselves. Here is a fantasy that after they die, they will be understood. That someone will reach out to them and connect with them just for a bit. They won't come back. That would be an impossible fantasy. But you can believe, perhaps, in this fantasy that I will pop them out of the egg and understand them for just a bit and stand up to those things that they fought against. I thought, and Wataten, the fantasy is there too. You can, if you know Wataten, you can write your own version of this a fantasy that meets you where you are in the same way. It is unclear to me of whether or not that shows that have that kind of mission are healthy. A show that meets you where you are and says it's okay. I think for someone who has lost someone to suicide, you would never condemn such a person. You would want to comfort them as much as possible. But it could still be unhealthy to present them like an untrue fantasy. Not, of course, that they would believe that it's real, but that it's escapism, I guess, rather than like genuine growth and moving through the problem. But no matter what, no matter whether or not this sort of escapism is healthy, if it can be part of a general grieving and recovering sort of thing, if it can be therapeutic, what's clear is that these are the idea of making a show that does this is a very deeply empathetic project to people who are marginalized and struggling. And I think there is a sort of beauty in making a show that tries to connect with those people, even if it's ultimately unhealthy, even if it's misguided. The empathy behind it, the desire to connect, the desire to show that these types of people aren't alone, I think is really beautiful. Wow. There's a reason, though, that I talked about the fantasy of Madoka and the fantasy of Wataten and the hypothetical fantasy that I was hoping from Wonder Egg. But Wonder Egg does not actually achieve this mission. Wonder Egg does not meet people where they are. The target viewer of Wataten, to put it bluntly and oversimplified, likely wishes they could have the life of one of the characters on the show. Probably Miyako. They wish they could wake up and that their life suddenly unfolds in the way that Miyako's life does. I'm not trying to paint all Wataten viewers with this brush, but that's the idea I'm looking at. That such a person having that fantasy is marginalized and ostracized and needs therapy, to be sure, but Wataten is meeting them there and giving them that fantasy. A target viewer of Wonder Egg does not wish that their mental health issues were partially due to a robot girl in a coffin psychically attacking. No! They would find that idea extremely insulting and trivializing. They would say, what the fuck? It is not because I am being psychically attacked by a robot girl in a coffin. It is due to, and then probably a very long list of factors, mental, emotional, circumstantial, material, societal, upon which there is no supernatural part. There is no sci-fi bullshit. It is all very, very real, very addressable, very, like, not... It is an alienating fantasy. One that says, I see you in this position. I know that people exist in this position, but we don't actually hear you. We are coming up with our own explanation for why you're like that. It teaches you something incorrect about the human condition. And to say incorrect is a very judgmental and heavy word, but it's certainly true here because it is just based on sci-fi bullshit and not based on the real circumstances of the world. Something that moves you further away from being in touch with your humanity if you believe it. And here again, I don't mean believe it in the sense that you think the story of Wonder Egg is real, of course, but that you start to question the motivations for people who commit suicide, that you start to become skeptical that things are actually as bad for them as they made it out to be. You start to feel like, oh, it's not the result of material circumstances, which we can change through a wide variety of techniques, from therapy to just moving them out of an abusive household to medication. But instead, some people are just like inherently driven to suicide, or that they're tempted by death. And I think this show kind of espouses, even though it's obviously not a robot ghost girl in a coffin, but that there are like mysterious forces behind suicide, when in fact it is all too known and real, and it's not a joke. So, they could have done much better. Here's the first thing I wish they'd just done instead. Instead it would be that they go to bed and they're contacted in dreams by troubled girls that are maybe contemplating suicide, but haven't actually done it. They battle with an embodiment of their trauma as before. We later see that the girl's life has not magically improved, but that maybe she just gains some courage to seek support and help, and that improves her life. Not magical. The magical world and the real world are very distinct in this scenario. This, of course, is largely tonally different, but only in the areas that Wonder Egg was very tonally underdeveloped. So what I mean by that is like a show about suicide and a show about girls that might be contemplating suicide are, of course, very, 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 very different. But that Wonder Egg didn't really explore that much what the tone of suicide ought to be. It just kind of left it up to the viewers for it to be like a super heavy word that the viewer projects their own feelings and trauma and stuff onto to make the show heavier. Where, you know, it could just have all the same scenes and stuff, and the show would have done the exact same amount of work. You see what I'm saying? They just like had this freebie of oh, if we say this word, it's going to be super heavy to a lot of people, to everyone. But it's cheap. It's cheap to do that. So here, you know, we could actually explore this kind of sci-fi stuff. They start to wonder, how is this system working? Who are the mysterious Akkas? And you can, you know, whatever sci-fi nonsense you want, because the stakes are lower. Because it's not saying something about people that actually commit suicide. In fact, I don't even like this idea that they're contemplating suicide anymore. I don't think that should be explicitly said. I think it should be even lighter than that they're just obviously very troubled and very depressed. I think this version could have been made. I don't see what's wrong. I don't see why they had to have all actually killed themselves. I think they just wanted to be more edgy. They wanted to play that freebie card of, whoa, suicide? They said that? Oh, that doesn't sit well with me. They just wanted that freebie. I think this show would have been way, way better if they dialed it back in that regard. If they didn't put their foot in their mouths and dive into this extremely sensitive, extremely tragic topic, and instead had all of the same messaging and even an opportunity for much greater messaging, much greater escalation, with a tone that is so much more appropriate to the series. It would have had all the same strengths and none of these horribly morally reprehensible weaknesses. The other option, and this is kind of what I talked about in the first slide that I kind of expected from the show, a dreamlike kaleidoscopic experimental journey into the lives lost to suicide. It can still have the same superficial structure of helping egg girls, but never, ever, ever, ever explain the actual mechanics, which again, what is the Aka's, oh my god, anyways. Egg girl backstory is explored in a flurry of scenes, all over emotionally, no exposition, just fragments to interpret. Happy slices of their life, sad slices of their life. It's up to you to construct in your mind. This is essentially what I was complaining about before, that they put the work onto the viewer to project their own feelings and interpretations onto it. I think that's actually fine, as long as it's not done cheaply. And here I think it would, if you really make it this very evocative, kaleidoscopic type thing, that's a way to not do it cheaply. That's a way to put in a lot of work to really spark the imagination. Battles with the Wonder Killer aren't just fighting. I thought this would happen. This was, like, in retrospect, like a very bold assumption on my part, that not every episode would just be that they kill something, but that with each egg girl it would be like totally different. I thought the first egg girl, because it was like bullying based, that it was about physical confrontation, but that later ones would be much more like philosophical, that maybe they would just play shogi, maybe they would just talk, maybe there would be no confrontation at all, no Wonder Killer, but just being deep in the surreal representation of their psyche. The show progresses, the structure falls further and further away, the characters are left adrift, some of them die maybe, you have absolutely no sense of what the show is building towards. Again, I think Madoka and Evangelion are quintessential examples of this. It ends in a mysterious anticlimax. Ai's friend is revived and disappears, and that's it. And you're like, oh, that was the whole thing she was fighting for. Oh. And this version could never ever be made. Yeah, this one is a lost cause. So those are the two visions of the show that I think would solve a lot of the problems I had in two different directions. One where they just don't wade into this whole suicide thing at all, and keep the tone a little lighter, and another one where they plunge so deeply into it and not make dumbass sci-fi explanations for it, but really allow space to explore the psychology of it and the circumstances of it and things like that. So, what would I give this show? Well, we're going to give it a question mark, because there is still the super finale, the real finale, the bonus episode in June. I gotta say, I don't have high hopes. I expect it will be they confront Dot, they confront Hyphen in the dream world and beat them. They confront Frill in real life and have some bullshit speech about the value of life. Frill agrees to voluntarily shut herself off, and then everyone stands around in a circle and claps. That's my guess. We can check in June if I'm right. I feel like a lot of the other plot points will be resolved in passing. Maybe Rika meets her dad. Maybe the company gets shut down. I don't know. It'll be like 5 minutes total. I don't have high hopes for it, but I do reserve my judgment. We'll see. We'll see. For now, it is a question mark. We will leave it unrated. All right. It's enough Wonder Egg talk. Let's move on to some good shows. Next, we have Pui Pui Molcar. Oh my god. Does this even count as anime? It's animated, and it's from Japan, so sure. But it's not an Anime Bites. I have to go down here from Ya, so I don't know. Whatever, I loved it, so we're gonna talk about it. It's a delightful, adorable stop-motion romp. The amount of sakuga and the direction and creativity and depiction is just a joy to behold. I don't know how they're able to film something like this in stop motion. I think there must be a lot of CG trickery, but it's so well done that you're never taken out of the immersion. And just the creativity around the way they do like smoke and explosions and just everything. Everything. It is simply a joy to behold this show. All the techniques used to emphasize the stop motionness are very, very charming. As I said, just the arts and crafts feel of it all. This gulp of the episodes really blew me away, diving into all slices of life, all sorts of genre parody, just anything and everything they could make an episode out of, and they did. It really felt like everything was possible, an infinite space of episodes. I hope there is dozens of seasons of this to come. And I think it was very fun to believe all of them to be like co-canon, that somehow all of this was really happening in the same world of Molcar. Just trying to speculate on the lore, trying to speculate on how society works, how the rules of the road work, if at all. More seasons, please. Please, please, please. Many, many, many more seasons. I feel like the potential they have is just infinite. They can do so many more genre parodies, so many movie parodies, so many little slices of life, so many beautiful little things. Oh my gosh, some of the episodes are so beautiful. The little Winter Wonderland one, I almost cried. A show that literally everyone I have shown loves. Please watch it. Please watch it right now. I watched it with like 3 different friend groups so far, and everyone loves it. I showed my mom this, and she loved it. I genuinely cannot imagine a person that wouldn't like Molcar. Here, I'll show you this too. My friends and I got into needle felting. Right now I'm kind of in a lull. I haven't done any lately, but one of the first things I made, actually the very first thing I made, was a Molcar. I made a little needle felt Molcar. I really love him. The eyes are a little wonky. I have to fix them somehow. They need to be set in a little more. So I think I'm gonna have to scrape out or further depress the eye holes. And the mouth isn't quite right, but I think I did a pretty good job for my first project. I think that was a good choice for a first project. It's got his little wheels and ears and stuff. It's my Molcar. I love him. So yeah, fantastic show. This is just easily a 10. It's just so good. I just love it so much. All right, and now for our finale, the last show we'll talk about is Yuru Camp Season 2. This. All the other shows were building to this. This is what I really, really watch anime for. This is what makes the medium so special to me. Other stuff can be shocking or awe-inspiring or mind-blowing. But in Yuru Camp, we get the quality that's really essential. An appeal that's unmatched in any other medium. A feeling of healing. A feeling of serenity. The purest essence of slice of life. Deep focus on the sensory appeal, the soothing hot springs, the sublime vistas, and most of all, the delicious food. So many recipes I want to try from this. Lately, among my friends, the circle of friends that I'm like socially isolated with, that we've kind of like bubbled together. So the people I spend time in real life with lately, we've been very self-aware of how much we talk about food. Not in a way that we're trying to like limit it, but just in a way that it's kind of funny that we're like, oh, we ended up talking about food again. We talk about food like a lot. We just love talking about food. And this show gets it. This show understands the appeal of talking about food, planning food that you're going to make or eat or order, enjoying it, talking about past food that you ate in the past and how much you liked it. And the way that food is this commonality between real life and anime, that I can watch them cook something and go, oh, I want to cook that too. That's so cool. There's no like there's very few other senses that so easily translate from the screen to real life. Like, sure, I can watch them go to an onsen and be like, damn, I want to go to an onsen. I can't go to the friggin' onsen. There's a pandemic. I can't fly to Japan. But the food, the focus on food is just this beautifully accessible way that I can translate the joy and the peace that I see in the show to my real life. So I really do want to cook a lot of the recipes I've seen in this. They do a good job explaining them and stuff. There's an exploration of a hobby from many vantage points and levels of expertise, something that I absolutely love in these kind of hobby-based slice of life shows. And I like there's a few episodes, a little arc on risky camping, on characters who underestimated the cold and needed some help. And I feel like this was something they decided was necessary to add, because the first season of Yuru Camp caused like a big winter camping boom. A bunch of otaku that had never camped before were like All right, this looks good. I'm gonna hit it. And probably like they had to call ambulances and stuff for all I know. So I thought that was a very compelling, wonderful episodes. But I was like, oh, this is like a public service too. Nostalgia, introspection, personal growth through making friends. All of those wonderful little individual arcs. But in this series, through their independence and adventurousness, there's a really stirring feeling of self-discovery and affirmation that a lot of slice of life series very quickly fall into a routine where the main cast is just always doing stuff, all of them together, and you just kind of see their individual takes on it. But here there's really a sense of doing what's best for you, carving your own path, gaining agency and independence on your own. A real sense of adventurousness comes through from that, even though it's a very, very slow-paced, low-stakes show. I have more to say about it. But then, on top of all of the stuff that is in many slice-of-life shows that I like in many slice-of-life shows, what really blows me away about Yuru Camp, especially in Season 2, is the cinematic mode. A new high watermark in structuring slice-of-life plots. I really believe that. Season 1 had some good innovation in that they really allowed the plot lines to branch widely. They didn't always need all 5 girls to do everything together. As I was saying, I thought that was really cool. But they really balanced this super nicely. I think this is like just subtly one of the most wonderful things about this show that you don't really... it's hard to appreciate how much it adds to it. But I think if it was gone, the show would suddenly feel like a lot less cozy, a lot more lonely. But they're always texting each other. They're always sending each other pictures. They're always checking in on each other, even though they're having independent solo adventures. It's so modern. It's so kind. It's so real. It really reminds me like so much of just the joy I have being in like group chats and stuff and seeing what my friends are up to and sending little pics and stuff. Like, that it really is one of the greatest joys of the modern era. I know there's downsides too. I know that people feel a lot of psychic pressure from that people can sometimes become like addicted to that in ways, and that there's all sorts of questions of how you present yourself. And I don't know why I'm getting into any of this, because what I'm focusing on here is that it can be a very great joy to be in touch with people like that. Season 2 goes even further with deeper exploration of their non-camping lives, larger independent adventures, and very captivating, especially the final arc, big multi-episode arcs of one big camping trip. And all of these ingredients and the freedom to experiment with them and to go in all these different directions are just woven into just the most perfect episodes ever. There's no feeling of artificiality, no feeling of like explicitness in the themes and how they're constructed. It doesn't feel like anything but a slice of their lives, just a chronological chunk of what these characters are up to. And yet a palette of emotion and tone is so carefully chosen, subtly guiding you to a climax of relaxation. And that sounds gross, but I left it in because it's very true that every episode has a point where you just feel this wonderful synchronicity that everything, all of the stars have aligned to just make the most perfect, blissful mood. I really wish I could explain this better. Everything within it has this light, poetic touch. There's comedic scenes, there's sentimental, nostalgic scenes that are just perfectly balanced and interspersed. I can't really describe how it works, in the same way that you can't really describe how poetry works. It's just so. It's just so. Production is beautiful, but goofy, serene, but often surreal. Really wonderful use of the imagination space that I talk about so much, of characters' faces becoming goofy and distorted. Rarely since Heat a Sketch have I been so delighted with how a slice of life show is delivered, that they just put so much passion into making it interesting, making it relay so much about the emotion and the tone in the choices of direction. That they never just do the default scene, that they always think of something fun to do to just kind of spice up the way it's presented. The soundtrack, oh my gosh, the mixture of enchanting new tracks. And just whenever I recognized one of my favorites from the season 1 soundtrack, which I listened to quite a lot, like outside of the show, I was a big fan of the Yuru Camp soundtrack. The rush of joy when I recognized it, exquisite. And of course, best of all is the characterization, the specialness in all the permutations of friends. They really did a wonderful job with like new pairings and stuff. That almost every character we get to see them interact at length with characters they hadn't interacted with before, and it really highlights the strength of the characterization, that you find these conversations believable and compelling in their own way and endearing in their own way, and it just really makes sense that they're all friends with one another, even though they're all such unique people, even though they all have their quirks and charms. And then the specialness in Shimarin and Nadeshiko, the two main characters, just the feeling of closeness they have even among their group, that they go off and do things just the two of them, and that even though there's a group chat, they still message each other privately, and that they have this very special care and consideration they show one another. I'm not even talking about Yuri. It sounds like I'm about to talk about Yuri, but it's not even that for me. It doesn't have to do with romance anymore for me. Like it's just really beautiful. Like it just is a beautiful, beautiful depiction of friendship in and of itself. It doesn't need my shipping glasses to be on. I do not need my Yuri goggles this time. It's just something that I've noticed I really, really cherish in my own life. A feeling of specialness, a feeling of a particular intimacy that you feel with people among your friend group. To cherish that in real life and to see that reflected in a show, that I can have all of those wonderful feelings brought up again just by watching the show is really special. It's really, really, I can only say the word special over and over and over again, but it's something that same with Yuno and Miyako and Hida Sketch, and the two main girls in Koisuru Asteroid. Yes, I'm noticing a pattern here. Anyways, well, Yuno and Miyako, I definitely ship that, actually, though. They're gonna get married. Anyways, and the additional depth we got in Shimarin, I think especially because I had watched Heia Camp before this, the short that takes place between seasons 1 and 2, and that Heia Camp has like very, very little Shimarin. I think that was very deliberate. They were saving her. They wanted us to grow like a little more distant from her, so that we're even more excited to learn more about her, and especially the interactions with her grandpa, the interactions with her family in general, like just kind of seeing why she is the way she is. Oh my god, the scene with her and her grandpa, I cried so much. I was just sobbing. It was just so beautiful. Yeah, I cried. I cried on many, many occasions. Just the care the characters show one another, the tenderness they have for one another. It's so beautiful. Never, ever more than now have I needed such healing. An innocent subset of life that we can be blessed enough to chance into on occasion. That some parts of our life feel like this, that the best parts of our life we're reminded of when we watch this. Here, forevermore, in the firmament of slice of life achievement. This is really one of those shows that reminds me why I watch anime, why I love this genre so much. Again, I would say, going forward, if someone wants to watch slice of life anime, someone is like, hey, I watched Attack on Titan. I watched Boku no Hero Academia. For some reason, now I want to watch slice of life anime, and I am coming to you, Emily, because you are somewhat of an expert on this subject. I would say watch Yuru Camp first. I think this is now the show, in my mind, that is, if not the best slice of life show I've ever seen, it wouldn't be crazy for me to even say that, you know, just the strongest overall, putting aside like my personal biases. Then certainly the one that I think makes clear the the appeal of the genre more than any other show. I think this is like a thesis statement on the beauty of this genre. This is, of course, also a 10. Alright, that's it. That's the season. We talked about a lot of shows. We had 35 slides. A fantastic season overall. You know, I have my beef with Wonder Egg. Well, that sounds like a nice dish. Beef with Wonder Egg. I have my beefs with Wonder Egg, but it was still an unforgettable experience. For better or worse. And other shows were just unilaterally, unequivocally amazing. And then a lot of other shows were just good. And just like, yeah, I'm having a good time watching this. It was an absolutely stacked season. This season could be maybe not better, but also just unbelievably strong. I'm really enjoying all the shows I've started so far. But you'll see in 4 months when I release another long-ass video rambling on and on about anime. Thank you for sticking it out with me if you have. It's an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 50 minutes long, almost 2 hours of talking about anime. Yeah, that's anime. Bye.